It was a busy Saturday afternoon, and the small restaurant in the heart of the city was buzzing with activity. The smell of freshly cooked meals filled the air, mingling with the low hum of conversations, the clatter of plates, and the occasional laughter of children. The place had always been known for its welcoming atmosphere, where regular customers felt like family and new visitors were greeted warmly. People came not just for the food, but for the sense of community, the small gestures that made them feel noticed and cared for. On this particular afternoon, an elderly black woman approached the entrance. She moved slowly, leaning slightly on her cane, and her eyes carried the weight of years, of experiences both joyful and painful. She had decided to step out for a simple meal, wanting a quiet lunch where she could enjoy herself without hurry. She adjusted her scarf, smoothed the wrinkles of her coat, and smiled at the host who glanced her way. At that moment, the server who was assigned to her section was in a rush, trying to manage several tables at once. The restaurant had been understaffed that day, and tension ran high in the kitchen and on the floor. The server noticed the elderly woman, and something in their expression changed. Without a second thought, they approached her with a curt tone and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you can't be seated here right now. All the tables are full." The woman's smile faltered. She looked around and saw that several tables were empty. She felt a lump form in her throat as she politely asked, "Excuse me, could I at least wait for a table? I don't mind standing for a few minutes." But the server shook their head and said sharply, "No, you can't. I don't have time." Their tone was final, dismissive, as if the woman's presence was an inconvenience. The elderly woman felt her face flush with embarrassment. She had walked into many restaurants in her life, sometimes greeted warmly, sometimes with indifference, but she had never felt this sudden rejection before. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse, trying to maintain her dignity in the crowded room. Some of the other diners noticed the interaction. A few exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure whether to speak up, while others pretended not to notice, caught up in their own conversations. Slowly, she turned and stepped back toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because of her age, but because of the sting of being treated as if she didn't belong. Outside, the sun was bright, and the street was alive with the sound of passing cars and people chatting as they walked. She sat down on a nearby bench, leaning on her cane, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside her. She felt hurt, confused, and a little ashamed, even though she knew she had done nothing wrong. Inside the restaurant, the daughter, who owned the place, was busy in the kitchen and at the counter, moving between the stoves and the dining area. She had built this restaurant from the ground up, pouring her heart into every detail, from the way the tables were arranged to the carefully crafted menu. Her vision was to create a space where everyone felt welcome, where food was not just about taste but about warmth and connection. She trusted her staff to carry out this vision, to treat every customer with care and respect, and she believed in their ability to represent her values. She had no idea that her mother, the very woman she cared for deeply, was sitting outside, quietly nursing her wounded feelings. The irony was almost cruel. The woman who had spent decades instilling values of kindness, resilience, and dignity in her daughter was now being treated with indifference in the place her daughter had worked so hard to make safe and welcoming. The elderly woman took a deep breath and tried to shake off the hurt. She reminded herself that sometimes people acted out of stress or ignorance, and perhaps the server had a bad day. She told herself that her dignity didn't depend on the approval of a stranger. But even as she thought this, a part of her still felt small and unseen. Back inside, the daughter was unaware of the situation unfolding just outside her door. She continued to move through the restaurant, checking on tables, refilling drinks, and making sure orders were going smoothly. She noticed some of the regulars whispering to one another, their eyes darting toward the entrance. Something in their expressions caught her attention, a mix of concern and surprise. She paused for a moment, feeling a ripple of unease. "Is everything okay?" she asked one of her staff members who was wiping down a table. The staff member hesitated. There was an elderly woman at the door. The server said she couldn't be seated and she left. "I think she might be your mother." Her heart stopped. She froze for a moment, the sound of the bustling restaurant fading into the background. Her mother? Could it be her mother? The woman who had taught her so much about life and kindness? She quickly excused herself and rushed to the door, leaving the busy restaurant behind for a moment. Outside, the elderly woman looked up, startled to see her daughter approaching so quickly. Relief and surprise flickered across her face. I didn't want to bother you," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "You could never bother me," the daughter said, sitting beside her mother on the bench. "Tell me what happened." The mother explained everything. The curt refusal, the dismissive attitude, the way she had felt unseen and unwanted. The daughter listened carefully, her eyes widening with shock and concern as the story unfolded. She felt a mix of anger at the injustice and sorrow that her mother had been hurt in her own restaurant, a place that was supposed to be a safe and welcoming space. For a moment, they sat in silence, the city sound surrounding them. As the daughter processed the situation, she felt a surge of determination. This was not just about her mother, it was about accountability, about the values she had worked so hard to uphold in her restaurant. She knew she had to address the situation immediately, not with anger but with clarity, teaching her staff why respect and empathy were non-negotiable. The mother, though hurt, looked at her daughter and felt a wave of pride. She had raised a woman who not only built something beautiful with her own hands, but who also understood the importance of standing up for what is right. The hurt began to ease slightly, replaced with the comfort of knowing that her daughter would make things right. Not just for her, but for everyone who walked into the restaurant. Together, they stood and walked back inside. The daughter's mind was focused, thinking about how to handle the situation without creating further discomfort for anyone in the restaurant. She needed the server to understand the impact of their actions, but she also wanted to maintain the respectful, compassionate environment she had always envisioned. As they approached the dining area, some of the diners looked up, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The daughter called the server aside, her voice calm but firm, and asked for an explanation. The server's face went pale as they realized their mistake. The daughter took a moment to explain, not to punish but to teach. She emphasized that every guest deserved respect and kindness, and that overlooking this could deeply hurt someone. She reminded the staff that their actions reflected not just on themselves but on the restaurant as a whole. The elderly woman, seated now at a table carefully prepared by her daughter, felt a mix of emotions. She was hurt, yes, but also grateful for her daughter, for the acknowledgement of the wrong, and for the chance to turn an embarrassing, painful moment into something constructive. She watched her daughter move through the restaurant with grace and authority, ensuring that everything was in order, and she felt a deep sense of pride. The customers, witnessing the resolution, began to murmur in approval. They saw the daughter's leadership, her empathy, and the way she handled the situation with both firmness and compassion. Some whispered to one another, noting that such accountability and humanity in a restaurant owner was rare. The afternoon, which had begun with discomfort and hurt, slowly shifted into a moment of learning and growth. The elderly woman enjoyed her meal, savoring not just the flavors but the care with which it had been prepared and served. The daughter had shown that mistakes, while inevitable, could be corrected with understanding and integrity, and though the hurt would not disappear immediately, the lesson was clear. Respect, empathy, and attentiveness were at the heart of every meaningful interaction, in life and in business. That simple act of recognition and correction began to heal the sting of rejection, turning what could have been a moment of shame into a story of compassion, reflection, and love. After the incident at the restaurant, the daughter couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Her mind replayed the moment her mother was refused service, the way the server had dismissed her so quickly, and the shock on her mother's face as she tried to find a place to sit. She felt a knot of guilt, not because she was personally responsible, but because the mistake had happened in her restaurant, in the space she had worked so hard to create as welcoming and safe for everyone. The restaurant itself continued its busy rhythm, plates being carried back and forth, conversations blending into a hum of activity. The daughter tried to focus on her work, but the incident lingered in her mind. She couldn't ignore it, knowing that something needed to be done, not just for her mother but for her staff and the community that trusted her restaurant. She walked through the dining area, checking on tables and staff, her eyes scanning the room for signs that everything was under control, but her thoughts kept returning to her mother sitting outside, hurt and embarrassed. Meanwhile, her mother had walked a short distance from the restaurant, settling herself on a quiet bench under a tree. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns on the sidewalk, but it did little to lift the weight on her shoulders. She adjusted her coat and scarf, feeling both physically and emotionally exhausted. The incident had shaken her, not only because of the rejection itself, but because of the way it reminded her of the invisible barriers and judgments people often faced in everyday life. She had spent years navigating a world that did not always treat her with fairness, and now she had faced it again in a place where she should have felt safe. As she sat there, a few passers-by glanced in her direction, some offering polite smiles or nods. A young man held the door of a nearby store open for her, and she gave him a small, grateful smile. The kindness of strangers reminded her that while the world could sometimes be harsh, there were still people who noticed and cared. But she couldn't shake the sting of the restaurant incident, the sense of being singled out and dismissed for no reason. Not long after, her daughter came rushing out of the restaurant. Her expression was a mix of concern, determination, and urgency. The mother looked up and saw her, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. Her daughter knelt beside her on the bench, taking her hand gently. "Mom, I am so sorry," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I had no idea this happened. Please tell me exactly what happened." Her mother recounted the entire incident. She spoke of the server's curt refusal, the dismissive tone, and the embarrassment she had felt as she tried to explain that she was willing to wait for a table. Her daughter listened carefully, absorbing every detail, nodding and occasionally squeezing her mother's hand in silent reassurance. She felt a mixture of anger and sadness, not at her mother, but at the situation itself. Once the story was complete, the daughter paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. She could feel the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, but she also felt a determination to turn this negative experience into something meaningful. "Mom," she said, "this shouldn't have happened. I promise you we're going to make it right. Not just for you, but for everyone who comes here. No one should ever feel like this in my restaurant." The mother smiled faintly, appreciating her daughter's sincerity. She had always taught her that actions mattered more than words, and now she saw her daughter ready to act. The reassurance helped ease some of the embarrassment and hurt she had been carrying. She realized that while the incident had been painful, it had also brought her and her daughter closer in a way that words alone could not. Together, they walked back toward the restaurant. The daughter held her mother's hand, guiding her through the bustling crowd of diners. Some of the regular customers noticed them and quietly observed, curious about what was happening. The staff, too, noticed the return of the elderly woman, the restaurant owner's mother, and a sense of anticipation filled the room. Everyone seemed to sense that something important was about to unfold. The daughter approached the server who had interacted with her mother earlier. Her expression was calm but firm, and she gestured for the server to come aside. "I need to talk to you about what happened," she said. The server's face went pale as they realized the mistake. They knew immediately that this was a serious situation, not just because it involved a customer, but because it involved the owner's mother. The daughter explained the situation clearly, without anger or blame, but with firm conviction. She described how her mother had been refused service, the impact it had on her, and how this went against the values the restaurant stood for. She emphasized that respect and kindness were not optional. They were fundamental to the way the restaurant operated. The server listened silently, shame and regret written across their face. Other staff members, overhearing the conversation, felt a mixture of embarrassment and reflection. They understood the gravity of the situation and realized how easily their actions or inactions could affect someone deeply. The daughter used this moment as a teaching opportunity, sharing her vision for the restaurant, the importance of empathy, and the responsibility each staff member carried. She reminded them that their actions affected not just the customer in front of them, but the community that trusted the restaurant and the legacy of care she wanted to uphold. The elderly woman was seated at a table prepared specifically for her, with extra attention to detail. Her daughter had made sure that everything was perfect, from the cleanliness of the table to the presentation of the utensils and napkins. She wanted her mother to feel special and respected, to undo some of the hurt caused earlier. As she sat down, she felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. The embarrassment and sting were still present, but they were softened by the love and care she saw in her daughter's actions. The daughter personally took her mother's order, asking her favorite dishes and ensuring everything would be prepared exactly to her liking. She moved through the kitchen and dining area with confidence, demonstrating leadership through empathy and attention to detail. The staff responded positively, inspired by her example, and began to reflect on how they could improve their own interactions with customers in the future. Other diners in the restaurant noticed the care and attention being given. They could see the genuine concern and thoughtfulness of the daughter, and it created a ripple effect. Conversations quieted slightly as people observed, and some customers exchanged appreciative looks. They understood that what was happening was more than just a correction of a mistake. It was a demonstration of integrity, compassion, and leadership. While waiting for her meal, the elderly woman and her daughter talked quietly. The mother expressed her feelings of hurt, and the daughter listened with patience, acknowledging the impact of the incident without rushing to dismiss it. They spoke about how such moments could serve as lessons, how mistakes, while painful, could lead to growth if addressed thoughtfully and respectfully. The mother shared stories from her own life, times when she had faced unfair treatment, and the daughter listened intently, absorbing the lessons and empathy that had been instilled in her from childhood. When the food arrived, carefully prepared and presented, the elderly woman's mood lightened further. The warmth of the meal, combined with the love and attention surrounding her, helped to heal some of the emotional wounds from earlier. She felt appreciated, valued, and respected in a way that contrasted sharply with the moment of rejection she had experienced just hours before. The incident, though initially painful, became a turning point. It highlighted the importance of empathy, the impact of thoughtless actions, and the responsibility each person had in creating a welcoming environment. The daughter's thoughtful response, her ability to address the situation calmly and effectively, and her commitment to correcting the mistake left a lasting impression, not just on her mother, but on the staff and customers who witnessed it. By the end of the meal, the tension that had filled the afternoon had largely dissipated. The mother and daughter shared quiet smiles, enjoying the comfort of connection and understanding. The staff reflected on what they had learned, recognizing that respect and care were not just expectations, but essential components of their work. The restaurant once again resumed its rhythm, but with a renewed awareness and commitment to the values that had always defined it. And as the day progressed, it became clear that even a difficult moment, when met with compassion, leadership, and integrity, could transform into a lesson that strengthened relationships, built trust, and deepened the sense of community that the restaurant had always sought to create. Daughter moved through the restaurant, her eyes focused but calm, scanning the staff and customers. She wanted to handle the situation privately, but in a way that the lesson would ripple through her team. She called the server to one side. The staff member's face was pale and their hands trembled slightly. They had realized the gravity of their actions and were beginning to feel the shame of what they had done. The daughter spoke softly, her tone firm but not angry. "I need to know exactly what happened and why this occurred," she said, maintaining eye contact. The server stammered at first, words jumbling together as they tried to explain themselves. I thought, I didn't mean, I was just busy," they said, struggling to find clarity. The daughter nodded slowly. She understood that mistakes could happen, especially when someone was under pressure. But she wanted the server to understand the human impact of their actions. "I know you were busy," she said. "I know managing a full restaurant can be stressful, but what you did had real consequences. You hurt someone who came here to feel welcome. You embarrassed her, and made her feel unwelcome in a place that should have been safe for her." The server lowered their head, ashamed. I didn't know it was your mother," they admitted quietly. The daughter's eyes softened slightly. She could see that the staff member wasn't malicious. They had simply acted thoughtlessly and without consideration. But that didn't excuse the behavior. "Not knowing doesn't make it okay," she said gently. "We have a responsibility to every guest, no matter who they are. Respect isn't optional. Empathy isn't optional. How we treat people matters, every single time." Other staff members were watching from nearby, some trying to continue their work, but most unable to ignore the seriousness of the conversation. The daughter turned slightly to address them, using this moment to teach. "I want everyone to hear this," she said. "What just happened isn't just about my mother. It could happen to any guest. Every person who comes through these doors deserves kindness, patience, and respect. If we fail to provide that, we fail them, and we fail ourselves as a team." She paused, letting the words sink in. The staff members nodded, some visibly embarrassed, some reflective. They had worked hard in the restaurant, but it was easy to forget that their actions, even brief, thoughtless ones, could affect someone deeply. The daughter continued, emphasizing that the restaurant's reputation wasn't built on speed or efficiency alone, but on the feeling each guest left with. Our food can be excellent, but if people feel disrespected or unwelcome, nothing else matters, she said. The server swallowed hard and finally spoke with more clarity. I understand I was wrong. I should have treated her with respect. I didn't think. I just reacted. The daughter nodded. Yes, and now you have a choice. You can learn from this and never let it happen again. You can show care and respect to every guest, no exceptions. That is how we make this restaurant more than just a place to eat. That is how we make it a place where people feel seen and valued. The conversation was not easy, but it was necessary. The staff began to reflect on times they may have been impatient or dismissive, realizing that those moments could leave lasting impressions on customers. The daughter didn't want to shame them unnecessarily. She wanted to instill understanding and empathy. She wanted them to leave the conversation with a sense of responsibility and a commitment to do better. Meanwhile, her mother watched quietly from the table. She felt a mixture of emotions, pride in her daughter, empathy for the young server, and relief that the situation was being addressed with care. She understood the pressures of running a business, the challenges of managing a busy floor, and the importance of teaching lessons without anger. She could see that her daughter's approach was thoughtful, fair, and firm, and it reassured her that such an incident would likely not happen again. Once the conversation with the server ended, the daughter turned her attention to the rest of the staff. She spoke to them about leadership, responsibility, and the impact of small actions. It's not just about avoiding mistakes, she said. It's about being aware, noticing when someone might need help or kindness, and taking the extra step to make them feel valued. Our restaurant is built on trust, care, and connection. That is what sets us apart, not just our menu or our efficiency. The staff listened, some nodding, some making notes for themselves, and some visibly moved by the words. They could see the sincerity in their leader's voice and the importance of what she was saying. It wasn't a lecture, it was a conversation. About values, about the heart of what the restaurant represented. After addressing her team, the daughter returned to her mother's table. She wanted to ensure her mother felt fully respected and appreciated, not just in words but in actions. She personally brought her mother a plate of her favorite dishes, carefully prepared and beautifully presented. She made sure everything was perfect, from the placement of the utensils to the freshness of the ingredients. It was a small act, but it carried a deep message. Her mother was valued, cared for, and respected. The elderly woman smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. She realized that while the earlier incident had hurt her, the way it had been addressed now created a moment of connection and understanding. Her daughter had not only corrected the mistake, but had turned it into a learning experience for everyone involved. The mother felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. She knew her daughter's actions were rooted in integrity, compassion, and a commitment to doing what was right. As they ate, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifted. The staff seemed more attentive, more thoughtful in their movements. The customers sensed the care being given not just to the elderly woman, but in the overall environment. It was a reminder that leadership mattered, that how one responded to a mistake could influence the energy and culture of an entire space. The conversation between mother and daughter continued quietly. The mother shared her feelings of hurt, explaining how quickly rejection could sting, especially when unexpected. The daughter listened, offering validation and empathy. She explained how she had addressed the situation with the server and how she intended to prevent such incidents in the future. Their dialogue was honest, reflective, and deeply human. By the end of the meal, a sense of calm had settled over the restaurant. The daughter felt a renewed commitment to her values and her team, while her mother felt reassured that her daughter's leadership extended beyond the kitchen and dining area into the very principles that guided the business. The staff, too, left with a renewed sense of responsibility and understanding of the importance of every interaction with a guest. The incident, initially painful and embarrassing, had evolved into an opportunity for growth, reflection, and stronger connection. The daughter had managed to turn a moment of failure into a teaching moment, a moment of learning for her staff, and a demonstration of love and respect for her mother. The elderly woman, though still slightly shaken, felt cared for and understood, and she could see the positive impact of her daughter's actions on the wider team. It was a reminder that mistakes, while inevitable, could be transformed into opportunities for teaching, growth, and strengthening bonds. The restaurant had not only served a meal, but had provided a lesson in humanity, empathy, and accountability. The mother and daughter shared a quiet smile across the table, understanding that this experience, though painful at first, had ultimately brought clarity, compassion, and deeper connection to everyone involved. After the server had been addressed, and the staff had absorbed the lesson, the daughter turned her full attention to making things right for her mother. She knew that words alone would not erase the embarrassment or the hurt she had felt, so she decided to act with care, thoughtfulness, and love. She wanted her mother to feel valued, respected, and fully appreciated, not just for being her parent, but for the person she had always been, kind, resilient, and dignified. The daughter personally escorted her mother to a table she had prepared herself. It was near the window, bathed in soft afternoon light, giving a warm and inviting feel. The table was set with fresh napkins, polished utensils, and a small vase, with flowers she had picked from the garden earlier that morning. Every detail was intentional, meant to show her mother that she mattered, that her comfort and happiness were a priority. "Sit here, Mom," the daughter said gently. "I want you to enjoy this meal, without any stress or interruptions. Everything here is for you." The mother smiled, a mixture of gratitude and emotion softening her features. She took her seat, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. The hurt from earlier moments still lingered, but it was now accompanied by warmth, care, and reassurance. The daughter went into the kitchen and personally spoke with the chefs and staff, ensuring that her mother's meal would be prepared exactly to her liking. She explained that this was not just about fixing a mistake. It was about showing her mother respect, love, and attention, and also demonstrating to her team how actions could reflect care, thoughtfulness, and humanity. The staff responded positively, inspired by her dedication, and worked diligently to ensure everything was perfect. While waiting for the meal, the mother and daughter began to talk quietly. They discussed the events of the day, the impact of small actions, and the importance of empathy in every situation. The mother shared stories from her past, explaining moments when she had faced discrimination or unkind treatment, and how those experiences shaped her understanding of the world. The daughter listened intently, realizing that her mother's wisdom came not just from life experiences, but from the resilience and grace with which she had faced them. As the food was brought to the table, the mother's eyes lit up. Each dish was carefully prepared, beautifully presented, and exactly as she liked it. The daughter placed the plates gently in front of her, making sure she had everything she needed. "I hope you enjoy this," she said softly. "It's all for you, Mom." The mother felt a wave of emotion. The embarrassment she had felt earlier was slowly being replaced by a sense of pride and gratitude. She realized that her daughter had turned a painful moment into something meaningful, not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed it. Other customers in the restaurant began to notice the care being given. Some watched quietly, impressed by the thoughtfulness and attention to detail. Others whispered softly, recognizing the way the daughter handled the situation with patience, empathy, and authority. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted subtly. There was a sense of calm, respect, and attentiveness that had not been as strong before. The staff, too, moved with greater care, aware that every guest deserved this same level of attention and respect. The mother took her first bite and smiled. "This is wonderful," she said, her voice filled with genuine appreciation. The daughter nodded, quietly observing her mother's reaction, pleased that her efforts were making her feel valued. They continued to eat, sharing quiet conversation, laughter, and reflections. The earlier incident, painful as it was, had now become a lesson in resilience, empathy, and the power of thoughtful action. After the meal, The daughter presented her mother with a small gesture of apology from the restaurant, a handwritten note expressing sincere regret for the earlier incident, and a complimentary dessert chosen especially for her. The mother felt deeply touched. The note was simple, heartfelt, and personal, reflecting the values of care and integrity that the daughter had worked so hard to instill in her restaurant. It wasn't just about making amends. It was about showing that actions, when done thoughtfully, could repair hurt and build trust. The daughter also took the opportunity to explain to the staff why the gesture was important. She emphasized that making things right when a mistake occurs is not a weakness but a strength. It demonstrates accountability, respect, and empathy, and shows that the restaurant cares deeply about the people it serves. The staff listened carefully, absorbing the lesson, and began to understand that their actions and responses mattered far beyond the immediate moment. The mother finished her meal feeling not only satisfied but uplifted. She realized that while the incident had been painful, it had ultimately become a moment of connection and learning. Her daughter's dedication, empathy, and leadership had transformed a negative experience into a demonstration of care, understanding, and love. She felt proud of the woman her daughter had become, and reassured that her restaurant was in capable hands. After the meal, the daughter and her mother took a quiet walk outside, reflecting on the events of the day. They spoke about the importance of addressing mistakes thoughtfully, about the value of empathy and leadership, and about how small gestures of kindness could have a profound impact on others. The mother shared her perspective on life, explaining how challenges and setbacks often teach more than easy successes. The daughter listened, absorbing not just the words but the lessons behind them. As they walked, the mother expressed her gratitude. "I know it wasn't easy," she said softly. "You handled it with grace, care, and thoughtfulness. I'm proud of you." The daughter smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She realized that leadership wasn't just about managing a restaurant. It was about guiding people, showing compassion, and creating an environment where everyone felt valued and respected. Meanwhile, back inside the restaurant, the staff reflected on what they had witnessed. They began to understand the importance of their actions, both small and large. They saw that empathy, attentiveness, and care were not just expectations. They were essential to the way the restaurant operated and to the way the community perceived it. Many of them made silent commitments to themselves to be more mindful, more patient, and more understanding in every interaction with guests. By the end of the day, the atmosphere in the restaurant had transformed. What had started as an uncomfortable and painful incident had evolved into a lesson for everyone involved. The daughter had shown leadership not through anger or punishment, but through empathy, understanding, and thoughtful action. Her mother had felt respected, valued, and cared for, and the staff had learned the importance of treating every guest with dignity and kindness. The day left a lasting impression on everyone. The mother and daughter's bond had deepened, strengthened by the shared experience and the way it had been handled. The staff had gained insight into the importance of empathy and accountability. The customers had witnessed a living example of how mistakes can be addressed with integrity and care. And the restaurant itself had reaffirmed its identity as a place of warmth, respect, and community. The mother, now feeling calm and appreciated, knew that while life sometimes brought challenges and moments of unfair treatment, the way people responded to those moments could turn them into opportunities for growth, understanding, and connection. She felt grateful for her daughter's leadership, her thoughtfulness, and her unwavering commitment to values of empathy and respect. As they prepared to leave, the mother and daughter shared a quiet moment together. They reflected on the importance of family, of care, and of the ways in which small, thoughtful actions could create ripples of positive change. The mother held her daughter's hand and smiled, knowing that her presence, her guidance, and her love had been felt, acknowledged, and honored. The restaurant returned to its regular rhythm, but with a subtle change. The lessons of the day lingered in the air, reminding everyone present that respect, empathy, and thoughtful action mattered in every interaction. The daughter had demonstrated that even mistakes could become opportunities for learning and connection, leaving a lasting impact on her mother, her staff, and her customers alike. By the evening, the mother felt a deep sense of peace. What had begun as an uncomfortable and hurtful moment had been transformed into something meaningful. She knew that her daughter's actions had not only restored her dignity, but had also set an example for everyone in the restaurant, creating a space where respect, care, and understanding were valued above all else. The following days at the restaurant were calm but reflective. The daughter, now more determined than ever, decided to take proactive steps to ensure that the incident with her mother would never happen again. She called for a staff meeting, gathering everyone together in the quiet of the early morning before the restaurant opened to customers. The staff arrived, some nervous, others curious, wondering what this meeting would involve. She began by thanking everyone for their hard work, acknowledging that running a busy restaurant was not easy. She emphasized that she valued each of them and recognized their efforts, but she also reminded them that their actions, both small and large, had a direct impact on the people who came through the doors. "Our restaurant is more than just a place to eat," she said. "It is a space where people should feel welcome, safe, and respected. That is our responsibility every day with every guest." She then spoke about the incident involving her mother. She didn't want to single anyone out in a negative way, but she used it as an example to highlight the importance of empathy and awareness. "What happened was a mistake, and mistakes happen," she explained. "But what matters is how we respond and what we learn from them. We must always treat everyone who walks in here with dignity and care, not just for me, not just for my mother, but for every single guest." The staff listened attentively, some nodding in agreement, others reflecting quietly on their own actions and experiences. The daughter continued, emphasizing that awareness and empathy were not just concepts, they were practices. "When someone comes in, they trust us to treat them well," she said. "Every smile, every kind word, every small gesture matters. You never know what someone has been through or what they are feeling. Your actions can make a difference in their day, maybe even their life." To reinforce this lesson, she introduced a new approach for the restaurant: sensitivity and empathy training. She explained that it wasn't a punishment, but an opportunity to grow as a team, to ensure that each staff member understood how to provide excellent service with compassion and awareness. She encouraged open dialogue, role-playing, and discussion about real-life situations so that everyone could practice responding with understanding and kindness. The staff responded positively, appreciating the chance to improve and the thoughtfulness with which their leader approached the matter. They recognized that the daughter's intention was not to shame them, but to inspire them, to make the restaurant stronger and more welcoming. Even the server who had refused to serve the mother participated fully, determined to learn from the experience and to ensure it never happened again. Meanwhile, the mother became a quiet but important part of this change. She shared her perspective with the staff, explaining how it felt to be dismissed and ignored, and how much it meant to be treated with respect and care afterward. Her words were simple but powerful, reminding everyone that empathy was not abstract, it was personal, immediate, and vital. Hearing her speak helped the staff see the impact of their actions in a way that was both human and real. Outside of the training sessions, the restaurant's atmosphere began to shift. Staff members were more attentive, more thoughtful in their interactions with guests, and more aware of the power of small gestures. Customers noticed the change as well. Regulars commented on how warm and welcoming the staff had become, and new guests felt a sense of care and attention that made them want to return. The restaurant's reputation for kindness and quality service grew even stronger, and it became clear that the incident with the mother had been transformed into a positive turning point. The daughter also took time to reflect personally. She realized that leadership wasn't just about managing a business, it was about setting an example, living the values she wanted her team to follow, and making thoughtful decisions in challenging situations. She understood that mistakes were inevitable, but how she responded to them could create lessons, foster growth, and strengthen bonds within her team and community.